ZYN stepped cautiously into the grand hall of the Galactic Academy. The room was vast, filled with sleek, futuristic technology and rows of students from countless worlds. Expecting another lesson on war strategies and the art of conquest, ZYN's mind was already preparing for endless stories of battles, victories, and power plays. But today, something is different. The professor stood before them, calm and composed. Without any dramatic flourish, the professor said, "Today, we study a species unlike any other. Humans. They are violent by nature, yet they avoid war." ZYN blinked in disbelief. The words hung in the air like a challenge, almost like a paradox. A holographic globe of Earth slowly rotated in the center of the room. Around it floated peaceful symbols, doves, olive branches, glowing softly in blue and green light. The atmosphere felt strangely serene for a military academy. ZYN's eyes narrowed. "Avoid war," they muttered under their breath. From a culture that prized strength through domination, mercy was a foreign concept, almost a weakness. How could a species capable of massive destruction choose peace over power? The professor continued. Humans possess technology powerful enough to destroy themselves many times over. Yet they choose restraint. This restraint is not from lack of capability or fear. It is mercy. A ripple of whispers spread through the classroom. Some students looked skeptical, others intrigued. ZYN fought the urge to scoff. Mercy? In a universe ruled by conflict? It seemed impossible. The professor's voice grew steadier. Throughout their history, humans faced countless opportunities to wage war. Each time, they hesitated. Not out of weakness, but because they understood the cost, not only to others, but to themselves. ZYN stared at the Earth globe. Flickers of human history flashed through the projection. Cities rebuilt after wars, soldiers embracing former enemies, leaders stepping back from the brink of violence. ZYN's mind raced. How could mercy be stronger than weapons? On ZYN's homeworld, hesitation in battle meant death. Power meant survival. Peace was a distant dream crushed beneath the boots of endless war. The professor paused. You may wonder why they do this. The answer lies deep within their nature, a choice not imposed by circumstance, but born from empathy. Humans believe that mercy, even in the darkest times, is the key to their survival. ZYN's heart pounded with disbelief and curiosity. Could a species driven by such compassion survive in a universe that rewarded brutality? As the class ended, ZYN found themselves alone with a glowing Earth hologram. The peaceful symbols seemed to pulse with quiet strength. For the first time, ZYN felt a flicker of hope. Maybe mercy was not a weakness, but a power far beyond their understanding. Stepping out of the hall, ZYN whispered to the empty corridor, "If this is true, then everything I've been taught is wrong." ZYN's journey had just begun, a journey not of conquest or domination, but of discovery. What did it truly mean to be strong? What could humanity teach a galaxy drowning in conflict? And most importantly, could mercy really be the force that changes everything? ZYN sat back in their seat, still struggling to accept what they had just learned. Mercy? Restraint? These were words that felt alien, almost meaningless in a universe shaped by survival of the strongest. On their homeworld, power was everything. Those who hesitated, those who showed mercy, were quickly forgotten or crushed. The professor's voice cut through ZYN's thoughts. "Let me ask you all a question," the professor said. "Why would a species capable of wiping themselves out millions of times choose not to go to war?" The classroom fell silent. The question hung, heavy, in the air. ZYN's mind raced. Was this some trick? A test? Or was there really something deeper, about humanity that no one had ever understood. ZYN raised a hand, their voice firm despite the confusion. Because they lacked the strength, they offered. Because they are weak, afraid to use their power. A ripple of whispers passed through the room. Some students nodded, others shook their heads. The professor looked directly at ZYN. That is a common assumption, the professor said slowly. But it is wrong. The professor paused, then continued. True strength, real strength, is not measured by the ability to destroy. It is measured by the control to not destroy. Humanity's restraint is a conscious choice. They have weapons capable of ending entire worlds, yet they choose mercy because they understand the cost, the irreversible loss that war brings. ZYN's brow furrowed. Control over one's darkest impulses? That sounded almost like a philosophical concept rather than a practical strategy. But the professor's words stirred something deep within. Could it be that the humans' power lay not just in their technology, but in their minds and hearts? To illustrate the point, the professor activated a series of images and videos. Battles raged across countless planets in the galaxy. Explosions, chaos, and destruction. Then, suddenly, the images shifted. Scenes of humans extending hands in peace, rebuilding shattered cities, and helping former enemies emerged. There were no grand speeches or dramatic victories, only quiet acts of mercy and cooperation. ZYN felt a strange sensation rising in their chest. Was it admiration? Confusion? The images contradicted everything they had learned about power and survival. Humans, the professor explained, have learned through hard experience that war does not bring lasting peace or true security. They have chosen a different path, one that requires immense courage and patience. ZYN stared at the flickering images. On their home planet, hesitation meant death. Mercy was a luxury only the strong could afford. But if mercy was truly strength, then the humans were stronger than anyone ZYN had ever met. The professor's voice lowered, as if sharing a secret. Their strength is born from empathy. They see their enemies as more than just threats. They see them as fellow beings capable of change. ZYN's mind reeled. Could such compassion survive in a universe filled with ruthless predators? Could mercy really be the answer? The classroom bell rang softly, signaling the end of the lesson. ZYN gathered their thoughts slowly, feeling the weight of what had been shared. As they stood, a quiet determination settled over them. If humans could choose mercy over war, then maybe there was hope for ZYN's own world too. Walking out into the corridor, ZYN looked back once more at the holographic Earth. The peaceful symbols pulsed gently in the dim light. A whisper escaped their lips. Mercy. Maybe that is the true strength we have been missing. ZYN knew their journey had only just begun. Understanding humanity's choice to avoid war was the first step. The greater challenge would be to convince others, and themselves, that mercy could indeed change the fate of worlds. ZYN sat quietly as the room darkened, the holographic displays shifting to scenes from Earth's turbulent past. The images were raw and unfiltered. Explosions tearing through cities, cries of anguish echoing in ruined streets, and soldiers locked in bitter conflict. It was a history marked by relentless war, not unlike ZYN's own world. Yet, as the scenes unfolded, something unexpected appeared. Amid the devastation, there were moments of mercy, acts that seemed almost impossible in the face of such chaos. A soldier lowering his weapon to help an enemy wounded in battle. Civilians risking their lives to save former foes. Leaders signing treaties not out of weakness, but out of necessity and hope. These were not stories of victory or defeat, but of something far rarer: forgiveness. ZYN's heart raced. How could such mercy exist in the midst of such suffering? In ZYN's culture, compassion was often seen as a liability, a weakness to be exploited. But here on Earth, it appeared to be a lifeline, a thread of humanity that survived despite the worst of times. The professor's voice cut through the silence. Mercy, the professor said, is what allowed humans to rebuild after war. It was what kept their societies from collapsing into endless cycles of revenge. ZYN looked around the room. Some classmates were nodding thoughtfully, others still skeptical. ZYN felt a stirring inside, a conflict between what was taught and what was witnessed. The holograms shifted to a famous event, a peace accord signed after decades of brutal conflict. The leader who brokered it was not a warrior, but a diplomat known for patience and empathy. Rather than crushing enemies, this leader extended a hand in peace, risking everything for a chance at reconciliation. ZYN felt a strange mixture of awe and disbelief. How could risking so much be seen as strength? On ZYN's homeworld, risk often meant death, and hesitation could destroy entire armies. Yet here was a leader whose greatest weapon was mercy itself. The professor continued, humans have learned that war destroys not only cities, but the very fabric of their souls. Choosing mercy, even at great personal risk, is their way of preserving what makes them human. ZYN's thoughts raced back to their own people, locked in endless conflict. Could mercy ever break that cycle? Could compassion be stronger than conquest? A quiet voice from the back of a room spoke up, a student from a peaceful planet. Maybe mercy is not weakness, the student said softly. Maybe it is a form of strength that we have yet to understand. ZYN turned to look. The words struck a chord deep within. Could mercy really be a hidden power, a strength born from understanding rather than domination? The classroom remained silent as the holograms faded. ZYN's mind was no longer filled with doubts, but with questions. Questions about what true strength really meant. As the lesson ended, ZYN stood slowly, the weight of the new knowledge pressing heavily on their shoulders. Stepping outside, the cool air felt different, charged with possibility. ZYN looked up at the stars, wondering if mercy could be the key to changing not only Earth's fate, but the fate of countless worlds. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, ZYN felt a flicker of hope. Mercy was no longer just a word. It was a choice that might one day save them all. ZYN's eyes widened as the holographic image of a human leader filled the classroom. The figure stood tall, speaking with quiet authority to a crowded assembly during a time when the galaxy teetered on the brink of war. The leader's words echoed with a calm conviction that demanded attention. We will not meet aggression with aggression. We will choose dialogue over destruction, mercy over might. The room fell silent, every student hanging on the leader's every word. ZYN's mind raced. Such a stance was unheard of in their culture. Leaders were expected to strike first, to demonstrate power swiftly and decisively. Yet here was a leader risking everything by refusing to fire the first shot. It was a gamble that could have ended in annihilation. As the speech continued, the hologram showed the leader reaching out to former enemies, extending an olive branch when others expected retaliation. The leader's choice was met with skepticism and fury from many quarters, but also inspired hope among those longing for peace. This act of mercy was not weakness, but a deliberate strategy rooted in deep understanding of the cost of war. ZYN's heart pounded as they watched the leader's courage unfold. The risk was enormous. If the enemies had responded with violence, Earth could have been destroyed in an instant. Yet, the gamble paid off. The enemy hesitated, then agreed to talks, opening the door to a fragile peace. The professor's voice returned, steady and thoughtful. This moment is a defining one in human history. It shows that true leadership requires not just strength, but wisdom and the courage to choose mercy, even when the stakes are highest. ZYN struggled to absorb the weight of the lesson. Back home, leaders were praised for their victories in battle, their ruthlessness, their ability to crush opposition without hesitation. Mercy was dismissed as naive or dangerous. But this human leader had rewritten the rules. Mercy had become a weapon more powerful than any gun or fleet. Questions swirled in ZYN's mind. Could such mercy be taught? Could it survive in a universe that prized strength above all else? What if their own leaders learned this lesson? As the hologram faded, ZYN noticed classmates whispering among themselves. Some looked skeptical, but others appeared thoughtful, perhaps even inspired. The idea that mercy could be a source of strength was beginning to take root. ZYN's gaze returned to the empty hall, the weight of the lesson settling deep. This was more than history. It was a revelation, a blueprint for a different kind of power, one that chose peace over destruction, dialogue over domination. Walking slowly toward the exit, ZYN felt a quiet determination growing inside. The lesson was clear. Mercy was not weakness. It was courage, the kind of courage that could change the fate of entire worlds. Outside, the stars shone cold and distant, but for the first time, ZYN saw a glimmer of light, a chance for mercy to become a force that could shape the future. The question remained, could their world embrace this truth before it was too late? ZYN knew that the journey ahead would not be easy. Changing deeply rooted beliefs was a daunting task. But armed with this new understanding, ZYN was ready to face the challenge. Because mercy was not just an ideal. It was a mission, and one that might save them all. ZYN felt a restless energy stir within the classroom as the debate began. The question on everyone's mind was simple but profound. Was mercy a true form of strength, or just a disguise for softness and weakness? ZYN's gaze swept across the faces of fellow students, some bristling with skepticism, others quietly curious. Mercy is a weakness, one student from a war-hardened world declared, voice sharp with conviction. It invites exploitation. In battle, hesitation means death. But what if mercy is a choice? Another voice countered softly. It was a quiet student, rarely speaking, known for having survived years of conflict by refusing to perpetuate violence. What if it takes more strength to hold back, to forgive, than to strike first? ZYN leaned forward, feeling the tension crackle in the air. It wasn't just a philosophical debate. It was a clash of lived experiences, of cultures forged in fire. On ZYN's homeworld, mercy was a foreign language, spoken only by the weak or the naive. The quiet student continued, I have seen warriors who never rest, fighting endless battles, consumed by rage and hatred. They win battles, yes, but lose themselves in the process. Mercy requires discipline, control, and above all, courage. It is not softness. It is a different kind of strength. The room fell silent, the words sinking deep. ZYN found their own beliefs challenged. What did it mean to be strong? Was it sheer force or something more? The professor nodded approvingly. Mercy is often misunderstood. It is not a passive act. It is a deliberate, powerful decision to resist the cycle of violence. ZYN's thoughts drifted back to their people's endless conflicts. Generations locked in cycles of revenge and hatred. What if mercy could break that cycle? What if it could heal rather than destroy? Another student, a seasoned warrior, scoffed. Mercy leaves you vulnerable. The moment you show it, your enemies strike. But the quiet student replied, mercy can also disarm. It can surprise. It can open the door to peace. ZYN looked around the room, noticing the subtle shift. The debate was no longer just about ideas. It was about hope, about possibility. The professor added, "Mercy requires more than strength. It requires vision. The vision to see beyond immediate victory and toward lasting peace." ZYN felt a spark of inspiration. Mercy wasn't weakness. It was a conscious choice to be stronger than hate, to break free from the endless cycle of destruction. As the debate drew to a close, ZYN's mind buzzed with questions and new understanding. Mercy was not a simple concept. It was a challenge, a test of courage and will. Walking out of the classroom, ZYN felt the weight of the discussion settle, like a seed ready to grow. Could mercy become the foundation for a new kind of strength? A strength that could transform worlds? ZYN was beginning to believe it could. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Mercy was not a luxury. It was a necessity. And for the first time, ZYN was ready to embrace that truth. The lights dimmed once again as the professor activated the simulation. A vast starfield appeared in the center of the room, shimmering with cold beauty. Slowly, an alien fleet emerged, massive, armored, and aggressive. It was a reenactment of a real event. One of the most feared species in the galaxy had targeted Earth, confident in an easy conquest. ZYN leaned forward, eyes locked on the unfolding scene. The invaders moved swiftly, their warships positioning above Earth's orbit like wolves circling prey. The class watched in tense silence, expecting the familiar escalation of force. But what happened next defied all expectations. Human defense systems activated, but not in the way others would have. They didn't launch a counterattack. They didn't fire first. Instead, the humans sent a signal, an offer to communicate. The alien commander, baffled, demanded surrender. Earth's leaders replied with a message not of weakness, but a firm, reasoned warning. Any act of violence would be met with a defense, yes, but only if necessary. Humanity offered peace before war, negotiation before bloodshed. The invaders hesitated. ZYN watched, stunned. This wasn't fear. It wasn't submission. It was a different kind of strength. The humans held their ground, calm and clear-eyed. They showed readiness but not aggression, confidence without cruelty. The simulation zoomed in on Earth's response, calculated, intelligent, and deeply measured. They projected cultural archives, images of rebuilding after wars, of aid given to enemies, of children from both sides playing together decades after conflict. For the alien invaders, this wasn't a tactic they'd seen before. Their society thrived on dominance. They expected fear or retaliation, not compassion. And it threw them off balance. The professor's voice broke through the silent awe of the classroom. The invaders came prepared to fight. What they weren't prepared for was mercy. Humanity's restraint destabilized their assumptions. It forced them to see humans not as prey, but as equals. Negotiation followed. The invasion never happened. ZYN felt their pulse quicken. The message was unmistakable. Mercy had disarmed an entire fleet without a single shot. The simulation faded, leaving behind only the image of Earth, peaceful, glowing, resolute. A student finally whispered, "They won a war without fighting." Another nodded. "They changed the rules." ZYN sat in silence, reflecting on what they had just seen. On their world, peace through strength meant intimidation, force, fear. But humans had turned that idea upside down. They had met hostility with clarity and courage, but also with an open hand. It wasn't just noble. It was brilliant, strategic, effective. ZYN couldn't help but wonder what would have happened if their own people had tried the same. How many lives could have been saved? How many cities spared? The professor stepped forward. You see, the true power of mercy lies in its unpredictability. In a universe that expects violence, peace is a disruption. A calculated mercy can fracture enemy resolve and force them to question their own path. ZYN realized this was more than a tactic. It was a worldview, a philosophy of strength defined not by destruction, but by control, empathy, and wisdom. As the class filed out, whispers of disbelief and admiration followed. ZYN stayed seated, lost in thought. What they had witnessed wasn't a fantasy. It was history, and history could be repeated if others were willing to learn. For the first time, ZYN truly believed mercy could win not just a war, but the future. ZYN stood at the edge of the Academy's observatory, looking out at the distant stars. The soft glow of the Earth hologram still hovered behind them, gently rotating, its peaceful symbols casting a faint reflection on the polished floor. But ZYN wasn't thinking about Earth anymore. Their mind had returned to their homeworld, scarred, restless, and drowning in endless conflict. They remembered the firestorms across the northern cities, the silence that followed every battle, and the faces of those who had lost everything. Mercy had never been offered. Peace had never been accepted. The only language spoken was war, and the cost was always paid in blood. Now, everything they believed was being challenged. Humanity had shown a different path, not only in theory, but in action. They had survived not just by fighting, but by refusing to fight when it mattered most. And that refusal had saved them. ZYN clenched their fists. What would happen if they brought this truth home? Would anyone listen? Would their leaders laugh, accuse them of being weak, or worse, traitorous? The thought was unsettling. Still, something in ZYN had shifted. There was no going back. That night, ZYN began reviewing old transmissions from their world. Speeches by generals glorifying conquest. Propaganda calling peace a betrayal. Images of cities lost because no one dared to imagine a future without war. And yet, within the deepest archives, ZYN found something unexpected. A forgotten message from a long-dead philosopher. Words buried beneath centuries of silence. The sword defends for a moment. Mercy defends for generations. ZYN read the phrase over and over. It struck like a quiet thunder. Perhaps the idea had existed all along, crushed by louder voices. Maybe mercy wasn't foreign to their people, just abandoned. The next morning, ZYN walked into class with a different energy. The room buzzed with quiet tension. The professor had announced that today's session would be a reflection. No simulations. No lectures. Just questions. What have you learned? The professor asked. Not just about humans, but about yourselves? The room went still. One student said, I learned that mercy takes more discipline than war. Another added, I used to believe enemies were to be defeated. Now I wonder if they're just waiting to be understood. ZYN's turn came. They stood slowly, heart pounding. I come from a world that has never known peace, ZYN said. We've been taught that mercy invites death, that hesitation is weakness. But everything I've seen here proves that wrong. Mercy isn't surrender. It's a form of strength we've forgotten because we've been too afraid to believe in it. Some students looked surprised. Others nodded in quiet agreement. ZYN continued, voice steady. I don't know if my people are ready to accept this, but I know I can't return the same. If there's even a chance that mercy can end the cycle, then it's a chance worth taking. The professor met ZYN's gaze and said simply, then perhaps your journey is only beginning. ZYN sat back down, unsure of what the future held, but certain of one thing. The truth could no longer be ignored. They had seen a different way, a better way, one forged not through fear, but through courage, restraint, and a belief that mercy could reshape even the darkest history. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late for their world to change. Weeks had passed since ZYN's revelation, yet the thoughts stirred by Earth's example had only grown louder. The Academy's corridors, once echoing with lessons of conquest, now seemed quieter, more contemplative. Whispers of change rippled through the halls. Other students had begun asking questions too, about restraint, about compassion, and about a future that didn't always end in ash. ZYN walked alone toward the interstellar diplomatic simulation room, where final assessments would take place. It wasn't a test of firepower, tactics, or invasion strategy. Not this time. This trial was about influence, communication, and the ability to prevent war before it began. Inside the chamber, a projection formed. Two civilizations stood on the brink of annihilation, both armed, both wounded by years of distrust. Every move ZYN made would shape the outcome. The observers, students, faculty, and high-ranking visitors, watched in silence. ZYN took a deep breath and began. Instead of issuing ultimatums, they opened with a question. Instead of demanding terms, they acknowledged pain. They didn't threaten, they listened. Slowly, piece by piece, the projected conflict unraveled. Where others had failed with force, ZYN succeeded with words. Not because they were persuasive, but because they were honest. We don't need to erase our past to choose a better future, ZYN told the simulation. We only need the courage to imagine one. The simulation concluded. The conflict had been avoided. The peace held. The chamber remained silent for a moment longer, until the room filled with quiet, respectful applause. Later that day, ZYN stood again in the observatory, staring at the holographic Earth. A message had arrived from their homeworld, a request for return. Not as a soldier, not as a student, but as a witness to something powerful. Their words at the Academy had reached further than they expected. Someone was listening, and they were ready to hear more. As ZYN prepared to leave, the professor approached. "You did something most never dare to try," the professor said. "You believed mercy could work, even when it wasn't safe to believe. That's leadership." ZYN nodded slowly. "It's not easy. Mercy isn't a shield. You feel everything. The fear, the doubt, the risk." "Yes," the professor agreed. "But that's why it matters." On the final night before departure, ZYN recorded a message, not to their world, but to the Academy. "If you're watching this," they began, "then you've already felt it too. The pull of something greater than revenge. The quiet, persistent voice of peace. We study weapons, battles, and tactics because we think strength is measured by victory. But what if true strength is the power to stop a war before it begins?" They paused, then added, "I don't know if my people are ready, but someone has to be the first to try. And if we fail, we'll fail differently, by choosing mercy even when it hurts." ZYN ended the message and turned off the recorder. Outside the window, their transport ship waited. The journey ahead was uncertain. The path was steep, and the culture they came from would resist change with everything it had. But they weren't walking into it blindly anymore. They carried something more powerful than fear. A lesson learned not through force, but through witness. Mercy was not just the refusal to strike. It was the willingness to see an enemy as something more. And in that vision, ZYN saw not just the future of Earth, but the hope of the galaxy.